After abruptly announcing their purchase of the former Arlington Park Horse Racetrack property in 2021, the Chicago Bears have all but abandoned their plans for the now barren land and have reopened their search for a fitting site to host their new enclosed football stadium. However, now another Chicago Metro sports team wants a new stadium, and with both courting state legislators, folks in Springfield have stated that they will not support separate projects for both teams, only escalating the drama for the Bears. In this video, we'll review everything that's happened since our first update on the Bears' new stadium a year ago, and break down the Bears' most recent decision to focus on the lakefront over Arlington Park. This is how Chicago won back the Bears. This video is brought to you by Raycon Everyday Earbuds. For those of you who may not be aware, I have some pretty insane hair, and I can't wear headphones without ruining it. So that's one of the many reasons why I have Raycon's Everyday Earbuds. They're affordable, lightweight, functional, and compact yet big enough that I don't feel like I'm going to lose them, whether I'm traveling or just working around the house. My favorite part is that despite being earbuds, they come with physical buttons. Press on the right earbud to turn the volume up, and tap the left earbud to turn the volume down. Tap 3 times on the right earbud to skip a track, and tap 3 times on the left earbud to skip back, and tap 4 times to answer a call. And I didn't even mention how to activate passive noise canceling or awareness mode. Never worry about wasting battery. The earbuds turn on when you take them out of the case, and turn off when you put them back in. Super simple. Click the link in the description box or go to buyraycon.com/Labrise to get 20% off your Raycon purchase, plus free shipping. Again, that's buyraycon.com/LABREECE. Only at buyraycon.com. In our last video, we recapped the Bears' history with Soldier Field, which was originally built without football in mind. We saw that the Bears' love-hate relationship with the National Historic Landmark has existed nearly their entire time there, and that Virginia McCaskey ended up firing her son Michael in the late 1990s after he failed to close a deal to build a stadium for the team in the Chicago suburbs, and didn't do much better putting a winning team on the field. Mike McCaskey stood firmly against any renovations to Soldier Field, and spent over a decade trying to move the team out. Once his mother brought in Ted Phillips, the first non-family member to run the franchise, he immediately changed the Bears' position, embracing modernizing Soldier Field. Fast forward a quarter century, and the stadium had become the smallest in the NFL, and the team still couldn't fill it. Nearly 20 years had passed since the controversial renovation turned the venue from historic landmark into what many called a toilet bowl. Regardless of what your thoughts were, the renovated version of Soldier Field was now due for upgrades, and other factors like location, logistics, and the undesirable lease the team had with the Chicago Park District all led team officials to conclude that putting any money into the now lackluster stadium was a poor investment. This is what partially led Virginia McCaskey to hire then Big Ten Commissioner Kevin Warren in 2023 to be the team's new president, who during his time with the Minnesota Vikings led their new stadium project, which ultimately concluded with the construction of US Bank Stadium in Minneapolis, which opened in 2016. Prior to his hiring, the Bears entered into a purchase agreement with Churchill Downs to acquire the 326-acre Arlington Park Horse Racetrack property in the Chicago suburb of Arlington Heights for $197 million, and did so without any mention or acknowledgement of plans for a new stadium prior to this point, and sent shockwaves across the Chicago Metro and rang alarm bells in the Chicago mayor's office, as $640 million of debt still lingered from the 2002 renovation. In 2022, Chicago Mayor Lori Lightfoot assembled a task force to put together a proposal to keep the team at Soldier Field, namely a significant renovation that would put a lid on what many thought was now an unrecognizable historic landmark. The Bears organization did not publicly acknowledge the city's plans, and instead continued to focus on their property in Arlington Heights. Later in 2022, the Bears released renderings of the multi-use district they planned to build in conjunction with their stadium, likely in an attempt to secure public funding or woo private investment. The renderings did not display a new football stadium, offering only a grayed-out placeholder to show where a new stadium may be located. Well, 1.7 million views, a new mayor, another losing season, and a year later, and the entire project seems in jeopardy, or at least, that's the way the Bears want it perceived. As per the Bears' purchase agreement with Churchill Downs, the latter party would be responsible for the property taxes on Arlington Park in 2023, This decision ultimately backfired, as the Bears had no seat at the table when Churchill Downs appealed the Cook County assessor's appraisal of the park property, who determined its assessed value was equal to what the Bears paid for it, a whopping $197 million, a 600% increase over the property's assessed value from a year prior. This particularly enraged the Bears organization, as they were actually expecting the assessed value to go down because the property should have been taxed as vacant land and not a working commercial property, which is taxed at a rate significantly higher than vacant land. The appeal led local school corporations to get involved, stating that they have a vested interest since they heavily rely on property taxes to fund their operations. Churchill Downs stated that they believe the property's assessed value should be only $37 million, while the school corporations argued that it should be no lower than $150 million, citing similar increases in property value across the local housing market. The Cook County Board of Review ultimately decided on an amount centered between both parties' projections, bringing their original calculation down $100 million to only $95 million. This didn't make either party happy, and still was highly unsatisfactory to the Bears, who knew that the assessed value was only going to continue to grow exponentially as they continued to develop the property. On May 4, 2023, Warren sent a letter to the school corporations to counter the Cook County Board Review decision, offering $52 million as the property's true assessed value. He went a step further and also stated that since the Bears organization does not have property tax fairness, they will not be moving forward with plans to develop the property at this time, once again sending shockwaves across the Chicago metro, as the Bears had already begun demolishing the racetrack, with the largest structures demolished the following month. Neither the school nor the Bears further pursued their dispute, and instead, the Bears pursued legislative action at the state level to grant them a temporary tax break before later backing off, and announced that the Arlington Racetrack property was, quote, no longer our singular focus. This opened the floodgates for the likes of the city of Chicago, Naperville, Waukegan, Country Club Hills, and Aurora to get on the phone and propose the Bears a fresh offer, and publicly admitted their interest through letters of intent sent to the team. The new mayor of Chicago, Brandon Johnson, has admitted to the city having two separate meetings with the Bears organization, but refused to reveal what was discussed and has said he won't support public funds for renovating Soldier Field without a clear return on investment for the community. Insiders say the relationship between the team and Mayor Johnson is better than what it was with former Mayor Lori Lightfoot, but the Bears putting any of their own money into Soldier Field to remain there still remains unlikely. In addition to the municipalities, a private developer working on constructing its own mixed-use district on a 62-acre parcel of land they call the 78 in the city's loop, only blocks away from Soldier Field, has also expressed interest. And strangely enough, the development firm is owned by Miami Dolphins owner Stephen Ross. In early 2024, a report suggested that the Bears were considering staying on the lakefront in the form of building on top of Soldier Field's only parking lot, with insiders saying that this was not a negotiating tactic with the Arlington school corporations, but actually was now the primary focus of the team. Perhaps the McCaskies would be willing to relinquish full control over a new stadium in exchange for significant public contributions to finance its construction. This would involve some complicated legislative jargon that was passed in 2021 by the Illinois State Legislature to allow the Illinois Sports Facilities Authority, or ISFA, to raise their debt ceiling and refinance their existing debt. As a matter of fact, despite having $589 million of debt remaining as of early 2024, largely from the original Soldier Field renovation and construction of Guaranteed Rate Field, all that debt comes due by 2032, a year before the Bears' lease expires at the stadium. And with both the bonding clause passed by the legislature and the debt refinancing, hundreds of millions of dollars could potentially be unlocked for a new stadium on the lakefront. In March 2024, more details were released about the Bears' plans, confirming that the team was prioritizing building a stadium on the lakefront, without saying exactly where it would be. They cited a poll showing that 66% of Chicago residents supported staying on the lakefront versus moving to the suburbs. The bigger news came, however, when Warren said in a statement that the team would put $2 billion in private financing towards the project. The Bears offered no other details, but it's believed that a new enclosed stadium would cost no less than $3 billion, meaning that even with the typical loan from the NFL, assuming the Bears didn't already factor that in, the team would need at least $600 million from the state of Illinois or the city of Chicago to make a new stadium a reality. The Bears also stated that they would increase the amount of green space on the museum campus, where Soldier Field is located. My guess is that the team probably won't rebuild the parking lot they use for the new stadium, and that Soldier Field's elaborate renovation from 2002 may be demolished, or maybe the old stadium in its entirety will be demolished. That's just speculation. The real reason behind stating plans for green space so early on is that the largest hurdle the Bears will have to conquer is the lakefront advocacy group Friends of the Park, who successfully sued to block George Lucas from building a Star Wars museum on the same site a little less than a decade ago. The larger issue here, however, was the museum would be privately owned, so if the Bears are staying on the lakefront on publicly owned land, that's likely to stay the same no matter how much of their own money the Bears put into a new stadium. But a significant amount of private financing would ensure the team would have much more control over the structure, removing their largest concern with Soldier Field. The Bears will likely have to come to some sort of agreement with the city of Chicago, the Chicago Park District, and Friends of the Park before taking any more steps towards building a new stadium. And so, we're still probably a good time away from renderings. A site plan may be leaked after discussions with Friends of the Park, but once again, that's just speculation. In parallel, the team will have to be able to secure public financing for the portion they will be unable to cover, and while the ISFA refinancing their debt and potential debt ceiling increase are encouraging, the Bears aren't the only ones vying for those newly available dollars. In February 2024, the White Sox of Major League Baseball released renderings of their proposed new stadium for the 78 development, which also featured hotels, restaurants, and high-rise residences. White Sox owner Jerry Reinsdorf told a local paper that the economics of baseball have changed, as the team's current venue and guaranteed rate field on the south side of Chicago, which has I-90 on one side, a rail yard on the other, and is an oasis in a sea of parking lots, doesn't have the amenities needed to generate enough revenue to cover contracts for star players. Reinsdorf alluding that just having a decent place to watch a game isn't enough in today's baseball. Complicating things is that he only owns 19% of the White Sox, with the heavy hitters of the team's ownership residing outside Chicago. This led Reinsdorf, who is 88, to state rather dramatically that unless a new stadium is built, the remaining ownership group will sell the team outside Chicago the day after he dies. Reinsdorf led a similar campaign in the late 1980s, saying he was going to move the team to St. Petersburg, Florida, which ultimately led the state legislature to pass a funding package to build the team's current stadium, which opened in 1991. The White Sox lease expires in 2029, and Reinsdorf says that the ownership group doesn't believe renovating Guaranteed Rate Field would be worth the investment, and instead is pursuing locations closer to downtown. The White Sox owner also stating that the team would not have the money for a new stadium, and the entire development they are proposing would top $1.1 billion, with an additional $900 million needed for infrastructure. With both the Bears and the White Sox coming home to mama to ask for some lunch money for a new stadium, the state legislature responded by saying that the two franchises would need to team up and develop a joint funding plan, an idea that Mayor Johnson said he wouldn't rule out putting money behind. Kurt Bailey, the president of Related Midwest who's developing the 78, says that the current plan for funding the White Sox Stadium within his project breaks down like this. Refinanced bonds by the Illinois Sports Facilities Authority, a sales tax overlay district that would take a cut of sales tax revenue from the vendors immediately surrounding the development, and finally, creating a much larger tax increment financing district to generate a $450 million subsidy to finance infrastructure, assuming that the amount of work needed is closer to Bailey's estimate than Reinsdorf's. These measures would fund Phase 1 of his project, which would include a 35-seat baseball-only stadium, 2 apartment buildings, a hotel and office building, and a dozen or so bars and restaurants along an extended Chicago Riverwalk. Bailey admits that he's only had preliminary discussions with the Bears regarding their plans and doesn't know much at this point about their intentions. Late last month, the Cook County Board of Review ruled to lower the Bears' assessed value of Arlington Park to $125 million for the 2024 tax year. The much bigger blow came when the board refused to lower the property's tax rate, maintaining the park's active commercial property status and 25% tax rate versus 10% for vacant commercial property. I think the biggest takeaway from all of this is that we are very far away from having anything concrete sorted out. I think the White Sox are fairly set on moving to the 78 district, but the question remains as to whether they'll get the funding they need to make it happen. As far as the Bears are concerned, their largest complaint about Soldier Field is their lack of control over the venue's revenue. So, I don't see how negotiating a new stadium deal with the Chicago Park District is going to be any more desirable, but if the Bears can pay for the majority of the stadium, that may be what makes this choice practical. It's not shocking that the Bears have changed directions, because Kevin Warren wasn't with the Bears when they made the decision to purchase Arlington Park, and as with most leadership changes, pivots happen sooner than later. However, I don't know the details of the purchase agreement the Bears have with Churchill Downs, and the deal may be difficult to get out of. If the Bears are in fact choosing to make the lakefront their first choice, it is definitely the option that has the most hurdles, negotiating with the city of Chicago and the Chicago Park District, and not to forget having to fight all the private advocacy groups who have blocked development at the lakefront in the past. On top of that, how do the White Sox and the Bears put together a joint stadium funding plan for the legislature if they're not going to be at the same site? I do find it kind of funny, though, that both Mike McCaskey and his successor Ted Phillips were both let go for trying to move the team to the suburbs, and were replaced with someone who thought it was best to stay put. Seems a little chaotic. That's all. Whatever does happen, I hope it's something that residents and fan bases are happy with. I'm still waiting on Northwest Indiana to make an offer, but hey, that's just me. For now, we'll just have to wait and see what big development comes next. Will the Bears release renderings of a new stadium on the lakefront, or should another surprise emerge? We here at LaBreeze TV will be watching closely.